Isn't that weird though? That just changes the conversation entirely. Something that has nothing to do with them as players.
That's a
Just the
great point
teams.
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great
Like
point
that,
too.
like whether Quickly is on the Knicks has nothing to do with Brunson's output ceiling or impact ceiling and OG Anunoby's output/impact ceiling. But
Totally
it
right.
completely defines how replaceable Brunson is or isn't.
Yeah. And if the Knicks had Dean Wade, you know.
Yes. Quickly the Brunson facsimile and Dean Wade the OG Anunoby facsimile. That's what a great show. We're doing great here, XJ.
This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host XJ. As always, he is my brilliant co-host Geoff. Geoff, I got to start out by saying, our schedule has been a little all over the place lately, and that's in large part because you have recently done some moving. How is that going on your end?
It's good. I bought my own place. I've been moving around a lot for the last 15 years almost. I've lived in 7 different states in the United States and then also 2 other countries at certain points. So I've been hopping around a bit. I think that one of the most interesting experiences I've had with other Knicks fans, like talking about this stuff and like the negative perception around non-coastal states with people is so strong.
Yeah.
And if I have like one mission in life, it's to convince people that like everywhere is awesome. And it's just like I've loved every single second of all the places I've lived and like all the stuff that might have been true, 10, 20 years ago, like the food, like, oh my God, but I need real pizza in New York. It's like, dude, the best slice of pizza I've ever had was at this local place in Indiana. It's like, I promise you, we've evolved, there's
Wait, was it a city? Like, was it Indianapolis or was it like a small town in Indiana?
Mm-hmm.
Even all right. Well, even I can have
so.
growth, I guess. I don't know. That's surprising to me.
My buddy, oldest friend in the world, went to law school there, and I was traveling full time to play poker then, and so I was living outside the country like half the year, and I just needed a place to call home. So I split a place with him, and anytime I wasn't working, I would just go back there. And it was basically like college for me. It was crazy. I was like surrounded by law students, and they were all like, I was the guy who anytime they wanted to do something fun, they needed a break. They'd be like, "Oh, I'll just hit up Geoff, and he'll say yes," because I was just there doing nothing.
Yeah, that's
and so on graduation day, obviously, law school is 3 years. On graduation day, I went to all my friends' graduation. I'm dressed up, and there's 2 L's who were friends with us who went to the graduation. And one of them comes up to me and is like, "Whoa, did you not graduate?" And I was like, "No, I don't go here." And she was just like, "Wait, what?" She's like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Yeah,
Oh man, you had an opportunity to play that off so well. Like, no, I didn't graduate. Like, I failed out. Actually, I'm feeling really bad. But
I'm the legend of my intelligence is too strong at that point. She would have known. She would have
known. It's impossible. Well, what is also impossible is for the Knicks to be bad when OG Anunoby is on the court. OG Anunoby is back. We are here to talk about it. We're here to talk about a lot regarding the Knicks, but specifically, obviously, if you're listening to this, that both Geoff and I are huge fans of OG and what he brings. And there's a lot that we can talk about around it. It's not just as simple as OG being great in terms of the dynamic that he brings to the team. Where do you want to start, Geoff, with talking about this OG return, what we saw in Philly the other night, and just kind of how we're thinking about things moving forward, having OG Anunoby and not having Julius Randle?
Can I start with, we're going to be super positive here, but I just literally sometimes I'll have Twitter open just to see if there's any conversation going on, try to, or if anything happens. Can I tell you something that Benji just tweeted that just absolutely breaks my brain?
Yeah, tell me.
Did you know, XJ, that Julius Randle does not have the second highest usage on the Knicks, this iteration of the Knicks?
Julius Randle doesn't have the second highest usage?
Correct.
Is it Dante DiVincenzo?
It's not.
I feel like this is a brain teaser that I'm losing.
Yeah, you're gonna fail. It's Alec Burks. So that's not good. Is what it is. That's really
That's
funny to me.
hilarious. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's pretty rough.
He should not do that. If times were worse, if the OG minutes didn't look so good, I think we would probably talk a little bit about just how terrible this Pistons trade is looking. It's looking like we're gonna have given Quentin Grimes up for nothing, like for people who
Yeah.
Tibbs isn't gonna trust at all. He might honestly. I think this could be a hot take. I think he's going to end up trusting Burks more than Boyan. I think he hates Boyan's defense. I think it's like literally. I think it's Fournier all over again.
Yeah. Let's trade Fournier for taller Fournier and treat him the same way.
He's not even trying to leverage the things Boyan does well to mitigate his weaknesses, which is like Tibbs does that sometimes. But like this is all or mostly on Boyan. Like Boyan has not taken this opportunity and shined with it at all. And so it's really easy to amplify his weaknesses. But I feel like for Tibbs, I could see him in the big moments, the bench moments, being like, yeah, I just know what I'm going to get from Alec Burks on both sides, like, and I could just see it, I don't even mean that as a criticism of Tibbs. It's just so wild to me.
Yeah.
But I do think that we would talk a little bit more about how like these bench minutes, there's nothing. They don't. Let me ask you this, XJ. Do you think we're going to get to a point where the Knicks have to make Randall the bench unit anchor?
When you say have to, I'm not sure what you mean by have to. Like, because I would, yes, I think the Knicks should do that. Absolutely.
Oh, well,
when you say,
I think I don't want to hold your feet to the fire, but like we had this conversation like 4 months ago, and you hated that idea. You said that Randall with the bench unit was bad. You don't like how. And I know this was with Quickly. So
right, that's the entire difference. Yeah.
Yeah. The Knicks had Quickly.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying is that do you agree that the Knicks don't have if their bench unit is OG plus Deuce Burks or Deuce Hart, Boyan, and a center, that right now it's looking like they don't have enough creation. I think they need Randall to get healthy and to play all of the non-Brunson minutes to have any chance to stay afloat.
Yeah, I wouldn't. That's very strong to me. I wouldn't say that. Like to have any chance to stay afloat, that's a very strong statement. I think that they can stay afloat.
I mean, in those minutes.
Yeah, I think that they can stay afloat. I honestly, I liked some of what I saw from the who was it? It was Deuce. They had DiVincenzo out there with them, which I thought made a lot of sense. Deuce, DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, Boyan, and Precious. I thought that was an interesting 5-man, and I thought that if you're able to, either have Boyan there or have OG there, maybe Boyan and OG instead of Hart and Boyan. I don't know. I think you could play around with it. I think Dante is a really good player to kind of like help bolster that second unit. And so I think if you stagger his minutes a little bit, you'd be like fine. I'm not really feeling like they're going to get swamped completely in those minutes when Brunson is on the court, especially if you have both Dante and Boyan or both Dante and OG. I think it's okay personally.
So we know that Tibbs isn't going to do that. So let's move past the staggering stuff. We know that that's not going to happen.
Well, they did play. That lineup did play, though. That lineup did play. Dante, Deuce McBride, Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, Boyan, and Precious.
But all he did was just take Burks out of the rotation. He moved down to an 8-man rotation. That wasn't a That wasn't a stagger. That was a Dante, you're playing 20 straight minutes for. Like
that's true. True.
That wasn't a stagger. But yes, I agree. The start of the fourth quarter was really good. And it had Dante and Josh Hart with Deuce and I guess Precious at power forward.
Yeah, Precious at the 5, I think.
So who was the fifth with them? It was Dante,
it not Boyan?
Deuce. Oh yeah, of course Boyan. Yeah, good call. Yeah.
I like that. To me, that's enough. That's a balance of like maybe you don't have great creators, but Josh Hart getting rebounds and pushing it up the court in transition, I think, is a really great way for them to have offense with that lineup out there. You don't have to try to like bog things down and see how we can make something happen in the half court. Like you can push with those guys, especially Precious at the 5. you can just run. And I like Dante spacing there. He can do some stuff. You have kind of like a bunch of guys who are like okay at being able to create something, but like four of them, with a center, which I think it's enough to me, honestly, personally.
Yeah, I agree that if he's willing to keep Dante in, like even when I'm talking about when Randall's coming back though. Like I think that I was really encouraged by, I don't know if you remember this, but in the fourth quarter, he wanted to get Brunson back in last time for like a little, and he didn't pull Deuce. Like that was his moment to get.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really cool because we've talked about this before. Versatility of roles, different ways to impact. That's how you elevate your team's ceiling. And so just that decision, and I know it's only a couple minutes, but a decision like that intrinsically elevates Deuce's ability to impact, because all of a sudden now he's not just the backup point guard. He's someone who can use his off-ball impact to, he's been such a good shooter this year. If you can not only be the initiator, but someone who's the shooting guard, you're a more valuable player inherently. Like if you can do more than one thing. And that's the thing about Bojan, bring it back to Bojan, is right now, correctly or incorrectly, Tibbs sees him as one thing, and that's, mostly a small forward. In those minutes, he was the backup power forward, and that helps him, even though he didn't do anything with it last night. He didn't make any shots. That in the long run, that will most likely help him. You go.
Oh, I was going to say, like, I do think Bojan at the 4 is, and it doesn't really matter. I don't know. If Josh Hart and Bojan Bogdanovic are both out there, like, to me, it doesn't matter who's the 3-4 or 4-3. I don't care. Like, I just like when they're out there together with a 5, and I think that it works. And I think that, to me, I know that you may have thought that Bojan's performance last night was like not good. I felt like he was fine. He took 2 shots. I could look back at the box score, but I think he took 2 shots. I just felt like
he 2 shots, but he also had 2 turnovers. Like he had few.
Yeah, he had 2 turnovers. He made one really good skip pass. I saw what he was trying to do. Like, he made one really good skip pass, I think, to Brunson in the corner for 3. And Brunson got an open 3. I don't remember if he made it, but I saw what he was trying to do. I think that Bojan is going to work out. And I know that it seems crazy saying this right now because nothing has shown us like that this is going to work well so far. But I believe in his shooting. I think Bojan Bogdanovic is an amazing 3-point shooter. I think that is just... that's undeniable. I'm looking at his shooting, 40% from 3, 41% from 3, 39%, 41, 43, 40. Like, Bojan Bogdanovic is going to be able to make shots. Like, it just is going to be true. That is going to happen. And I just think he needs to be in the right role for him, which I believe is ideally is in a situation whether he's next to OG, which I think is really great for him to play next to OG, or next to Josh Hart and a center. I think that it'll work if he gets to be in the positions that are appropriate for him.
So if the Knicks in the playoffs ran out bench lineups of Deuce, Hart, Bojan, OG, and a center, you think that could stay afloat for a couple of minutes each half and you wouldn't have a problem with that?
Absolutely. I think that can stay afloat. I think that can beat some second units that they play against. I don't think that's a lineup that I'm just, we're gonna get run off the court. How are we gonna come back with Brunson? Like, I think that lineup would be fine.
Did you see the Tibbs soundbite to Chris's question in the post game yesterday?
Yeah, I don't remember what it was, but I did see it. Yeah. Remind me what it was again.
He was like, I didn't even know who was the 3 or the 4 between OG and Hart. And I was like, oh my God, he's landing on it. He's positionless basketball. Tibbs is getting there. Man, he was like so in awe of it. He's like, yeah, they can be interchangeable. It's like,
yeah, that's sick. That's sick. Well, you were mentioning like Randall coming back, and I want to take a second to not even think about Randall, honestly. Like, and obviously Randall coming back helps this team immensely. Like, I hope that everybody recognizes that. I realize that. I just really love what the team looks like with OG back. And what I think about OG is that he just changes everything on both ends of the court, not just because of individual greatness, because obviously he's individually great, but his presence truly allows the Knicks to play like an optimal style of basketball, in my opinion. And not only that, it also like makes the second unit so much better as well, in my opinion, especially when he can play with them and you can mix and match a lot better. He gives you so much lineup versatility. It's crazy. But OG's impact, especially just his existence on the court. There was a play in the Sixers game where Hartenstein got a dunk on a high pick and roll with Brunson that absolutely would not have been there without OG spacing. Because they put Josh Hart in the strong side corner, and then they put OG in the weak side corner.
6-0.
Yes, exactly. Dante on the wing. And that meant that nobody on the strong side could help on the pick and roll. You have Dante and OG over there. And if Precious was there, obviously, teams should obviously help off of him from the weak side corner, which would have killed that play completely. But instead, you get a dunk. So I just think, like, this is, as people know, this is kind of like my underlying thesis of basketball. Like, you can't play guys who can be completely ignored on the perimeter. And in the NBA, defense in the NBA is all about help. You know, it's like a puzzle of like, how can we help slow down your offense? How can we help slow down your offensive threats to negate an advantage that you might have without giving you a new greater advantage, right? And the defense wants to help. The offense wants to punish the defense for helping. And the easiest way to punish help is by hitting an open three at a high clip. So you have OG Anunoby back. I believe he doesn't have to do anything but hit threes at a high clip. He shoots 43% on wide open threes. He shoots 49% from the left corner on left corner threes. If you're giving him open threes or corner threes, you're giving up like between like 1.3 points per shot and 1.47 points per shot. You can't live with that. It's like teams. It's like if teams are like, what are we okay with living with? You're not okay with living with that. You can't. You're dead if you're living with that. So to me, it changes everything. OG at the 4 is completely different. I honestly better than OG at the 3. And of course, you were just talking about how the Josh Hart OG thing is interchangeable. But what I'm saying is if you have like a 4 who's a 4 who's a 4, that makes OG the token 3. When you have two guys like Hart and OG, it doesn't really matter. But the point is that you have OG spacing in those situations, which opens up the court for everybody else on the team. So I think it's night and day what this team is with OG and without OG because of his individual greatness, but also just because of his presence that creates much better dynamics for the team.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I 100% agree with you. I mean, we're very much in alignment here. I don't think I could have said it any better. The one amendment I would want to make is that if you're going to be helped off of, if you're going to be the guy that defenses are willing to live with, you have to be able to exploit the advantages that are created for you. And to me, that's the huge fundamental difference between Precious Achiuwa and Josh Hart. Because after that play you're talking about, when the Knicks went up 6-0 and Nick Nurse called a timeout, the Knicks actually ran the same action their next time down the court. And Hartenstein got the ball on the short roll, except Josh Hart's man had pre-stunted. And so there was no lane available to him. And it was at that moment that Nick Nurse, he showed his hand. He was like, okay, we're not giving up. I'm done giving up paths to the basket. I'm done. You can help off Josh Hart anytime. He's the guy we'll live with. And when that's going to be what happens in the playoffs. That's when Josh Hart is on the court, he's going to be the guy that teams are willing to live with letting them beat them. We've seen it plenty. And it's just on Josh Hart to take advantage of it. He's a skilled passer. He's skilled in transition. He can shoot. It sounds weird to say this, but at one point he was 6 of 11 last night and he was 1 of 5 from 3. I think those were his shooting splits at halftime. And I thought the 5 threes were the most encouraging part of what he'd done because he's always so in his head and so much like, if the threes aren't falling, I'm just not going to take them. But you have to shoot them when they're available to you and they're that open. And so for him to be in a spot where he's comfortable going 1 of 5 and living with the variance, he becomes a more valuable player even when they're not going in because the defense, if they see that you're shooting them over and over again, eventually they're not going to rotate as strong as they would to like an OG Anunoby, but they are going to make a small adjustment. And that's why Josh Hart was able to go 5 of 6 inside the arc in that same half. All of a sudden, the twos are available to him. How many times have you seen Josh Hart take 11 shots and a half? But it's like the defense chose him as the guy that they're going to try to exploit the Knicks deficiencies through Josh Hart. And Josh Hart has to counter that, and he did it last night. So everything you said about OG Anunoby is true. I just want to add that if you're not able to beat them as a shooter consistently, you can still take advantage of an advantage, for lack of a better word, advantage that the defense is willing to give to you without making your threes consistently. It's just a little bit harder. And I was really encouraged by how Josh Hart went about that last night.
I love that point. I think it's an amazing point. And I agree with it. And I would add the caveat that you can do that. You just can't have two guys out there trying to do that. You can't have, like, it's cool if Josh Hart is the only one who is, teams are helping off of, and then he has to figure out a way to take advantage of the space that they're allowing him. I think that that's totally cool, and you can figure it out that way. You just can't have two guys that the teams are just like, yeah, we're cool with like letting them do whatever they do, because you're just not gonna have space. And to your point, there was a play that I'm thinking of where OG and Dante were both spacing on the weak side, and then Josh Hart cuts to the basket. Kyle Lowry was effectively the low man in that situation. He takes a step to OG in the corner, which gives Hart an easy layup. It was kind of weird. Like, I was like, Lowry probably should have just defended the rim and forget about OG, but OG is such a good shooter. He makes you make mistakes like that. And Josh Hart actually got two layups off of cuts that were identical. Like, OG in the corner, Josh Hart cutting. The defender's like, should I try to stop the Josh Hart drive, or should I try to get out to OG and make sure he doesn't get an open three? And I just think, like, Josh Hart is allowed to be his most effective self when there's space on the court. Like, and I think that it allows him to be less kind of what you just said, like in his head about like, am I making threes? Am I not making threes? I think the thing about threes, and I talked to Benji Ritholtz on one of our Knicks Film School live watch alongs. I talked to him about this, about how a shooter, it's hard for a shooter to just be like, have no conscience, because it's like, it's already a lower percentage shot anyway, right? So even if you're the best in the world at it, you're making it 40% of the time. So you're still missing way more than you make it. And so when you're missing a bunch of threes, it's like you feel like you're hurting the team. It's like, this is the only shot I'm taking and I'm missing it. You don't feel that like boost. And I honestly think this is why like NBA players love mid-range shots, because they feel like they can make it at such a high clip. And it just feels good, like I'm making the shot, right? Like whether it's, it's this much value for the shot or this much value for the shot. It's like, I'm making the shot. So you feel good about it. You feel like you're contributing to your team. If you're pulling up threes and you're missing, let's say you miss 3 or 4, it's like, I don't want to keep doing this. I'm hurting my team. I'm shooting a low percentage. I want to get to the rim. I want to get to the mid-range where I feel like I can make shots at a higher clip. It's more likely I'm going to make it. Even not kind of understanding that there's value to just shooting the shot, right? Like, you don't feel like you're contributing value just by shooting a shot and not making it. And so I think for Josh Hart, something that is awesome is that when he's able to get cuts to the basket and he can score inside, he's feeling like he's contributing to the team in a really substantial way. And I think he is. And so that maybe frees him up to say, like, yeah, I could take a couple shots, like what's a heat check? A heat check is, man, I've helped us out so much with my last few shots that I feel fine that I'm going to just use this possession and just like see if I can make another one. Like, but that only is able to happen because you're like, I've done enough to help my team. I'm not worried about letting you guys down right now. I'm going to pull this up right now. Like, right. Like, it creates that dynamic. So I just think that all of it is like intertwined. And I think there's an aspect of it where if you're getting Josh Hart these kind of easy baskets where he can cut into space, he can feel like he can get to the rim, he feels like he can take advantage of the way that teams are playing him, that's going to build his confidence to also be able to shoot more threes, which is going to help the team overall.
And what you're touching upon right now is the beautiful interactivity of modern basketball. Like, it's so much less of a one-on-one game than it's ever been. Even if the most common action is a pick and roll where, you're trying to create an advantage one-on-one, there's so many small little ways to impact with off the ball, and basically what you saw last night was the Knicks went from Precious Achiuwa to OG Anunoby. And so there are people who would view Josh Hart and be like, oh my God, we just got a better version of Josh Hart. But he was elevated by the presence of OG Anunoby. And those are things that go unnoticed by a lot of NBA fans is how prevalent these tiny impacts that have nothing to do with what's going on with the ball, with whose hands the ball is in. And that was really emphasized last night because we basically saw both polar extremes, for the last week. Like if you just looked at the Knicks' last 2 games against the 76ers, you had one game with Precious Achiuwa starting at power forward, and the Knicks score 73 points. And like, I'm not blaming that all on Precious Achiuwa, but it's why it can't be as simple as like, well, are we sure Precious Achiuwa, like the Knicks lost by X points, is Precious Achiuwa's presence at power forward? Can you find 3 possessions where his presence at power forward was worth X points? And it's greater than that. It's a domino effect. It has a, it's not just Precious Achiuwa. How many shots did he miss? How many times did the ball find his hands and he wasn't able to shoot a 3? It's every single possession he's out there. It's collapsing value in a negative way. And OG Anunoby is the other way. Every single time he's out there, every single time he's on the court, the defense has to account for where he is. It's basically we talk about it all the time. It's the Steph Curry thing. Like if Steph Curry isn't as valuable as his output says he is, he's way more valuable because literally every single time he's on the court, the defense has to account for where he is, and they have to do certain things against the other players just because of his existence. And I'm not saying OG Anunoby is Steph Curry, but it's a similar profile of impact in the sense of the defense has to account for him when he's in the corner because they just don't want to give up, a 50% corner 3. That's just too detrimental to defense.
Yeah, exactly right. I totally agree, obviously. And I think that the thing about it too, to me, is that we also see that effect on the defensive end as well. And we wouldn't think so. Maybe some people wouldn't think so because we think of like Precious Achiuwa as like, oh, he's like this really good defensive player. But when you're going from Precious to OG, on the defensive end, it might be a bigger upgrade defensively than it is offensively, which is crazy to say. Like OG Anunoby, I think that people don't realize at this stage yet, like how good he is defensively. And I say that because here's what I'll say. You said this before. You mentioned about watching Draymond Green, watching a game and just watching Draymond Green on the defensive end. Knicks fans should just watch a game and just watch OG and Anunoby on the defensive end. Just like go back, watch a full game, and exclusively don't look at the ball, forget about the ball. Watch OG when the Knicks are on defense. His activity, his instincts, his help off ball, his ability to get to the right spot and discourage offensive players from doing certain things. It's almost like, when you have a center who they don't really need to even block shots, but like just his presence is a deterrent for players to take shots even near the rim. That's what OG does, like on all types of situations. Like, you know what? I would have made this pass, but OG's lurking. He's too close. So I'm going to swing it the other way. And guess what? The whole action, any minor advantage that you might have had is already negated completely. And his ability to like anticipate, like, okay, this player's going to turn now, so I can go for the steal or the trap. Or when he's on ball, he always knows where his help is. He's never letting you get back to the side of the court, whether it's like baseline or middle, where you're going to have an easier time getting your shot off. Like he doesn't make just slight mistakes like that. And off the ball, he's never going to be standing like, in no man's land with bad help positioning where the only the player with the ball can make a simple pass to get an open shot. Like we see that kind of stuff not only with Bojan Bogdanovic, who is a terrible defensive player both on and off the ball, but we also see it with Julius Randle, and we also see it with Precious Achiuwa, specifically off ball on the perimeter. And OG is just on a different level than anyone else the Knicks could play at the 4, and you just can't account for that stuff in a box score. And so to me, as talented as OG is on the ball, he's also ridiculously good off the ball in almost all situations. Now, I haven't even talked about his ability to switch and potentially guard players at least reasonably well 1 through 5. So I think it's underrated how much of a improvement it is going from, Precious at the 4, not only on the offensive end, but at the defensive end too. So I'm curious what you think about that, because I know people really like Precious' defense, and I think he's a good defender. I think just like OG is just on a complete another level.
So I think what you're saying is that if you could clone OG Anunoby and get 48, like This is a clone situation, you know. I think that's what the people want to hear again is another clone discussion.
I think people want to hear that the Knicks are officially a clone team. And when we say a clone team, we had a discussion, a few weeks ago where we talked about teams where they have some players on the team that are like redundant in terms of their abilities, their talents, the way they impact the game. They had the best and biggest impact on the game. They maybe have some redundancy, and eliminating or removing one of those players could potentially cause those teams to have, the same amount of success or even greater success, depending on what the other components are. One of those teams, one of those such teams is like the Cleveland Cavaliers, where they have Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, who are pretty similar players.
They're a double clone team because they have it at the big too.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. They are a double clone team. I don't even think of like, I don't want to get into Evan Mobley conversation, but yeah, they are a double clone team. And honestly, a new entry, a new foray into the clone awards is the Minnesota Timberwolves, who lost Karl Anthony Towns, and it'll be really interesting to see what Edwards continues to do without Towns and see if that really has an impact on them. And the Knicks, now that they have OG Anunoby not having Julius Randle, we'll see how much of a drop off that there is, or if there is a drop off, And so I think that's the question. I think it makes all the difference when you have OG Anunoby. And the other thing I want to say is that when you lose a player, the thing is you're just not like losing a player, you're also like substituting that player for another player, and that's like part of the issue, right? It's not just like minus. So when we're talking about Julius Randle specifically, it's not just like, hey, we're losing Julius Randle and then we're gaining a guy who's like almost as good. You're losing Julius Randle, and now you have guys who are nowhere near as good playing a lot more minutes, and guys who wouldn't even play minutes, now they're actually playing some minutes. So it's like, it just it makes a big difference. It's really hard to make up for that level of talent. So I would never sit here and argue like the Knicks would be better off without Julius Randle. I'm just saying that you would expect the drop off to losing an all NBA level player to be immense when you lose Julius Randle and don't replace him with somebody who's anywhere near comparable. But because of this clone dynamic, I don't expect the drop off to be as much.
And I think it highlights your point better or more if you think about it the other way. Like, because when Julius Randle comes back, and if things go the way that they've been going, what the discourse around how Knicks fans are going to feel. The conversation is going to be, holy shit, we're the sick team, and now we're adding Julius Randle to the mix. And it's not going to work like that. Like, and again, it's not like the Knicks are going to get worse, but people act like, it's like you have, if the Knicks are a 90 out of, 100, and Julius Randle himself is in 90 out of 100, we're adding Julius Randle to the mix, and now all of a sudden we become 180, like it's just this perfect sum of its parts. And that's not really how basketball works, unfortunately. So the idea that, however the Knicks are playing, we're just going to add Julius Randle to the mix and it's going to be seamless, that unfortunately that's not it, because adding Julius Randle will bring good things. Of course, he's really good at basketball and he brings a lot of positives, but the addition of Julius Randle will also remove certain things. Jalen Brunson will have the ball less. So, that Jalen Brunson's ability to fully impact is going to go down. OG Anunoby is going to play less time at power forward. His ability to fully impact goes down. So, me and XJ have dabbled in this joke idea of lube, but the idea of high lube players is guys whose impact is non-diminishing and just fully additive. Guys who, when they're the best version of themselves, it takes nothing off the table from other players' ability to impact. And what you saw with replacing Precious Achiuwa, like, forget OG for a second and just think about replacing Precious Achiuwa with Julius Randle. The upgrade would be massive, but still, when you make that replacement, you're taking things away that Precious Achiuwa was doing well, and you're not fully replacing them with Julius Randle, because Julius Randle either isn't as good. We're talking about defense here. Precious Achiuwa is good at man defense. We saw that with him at the power forward Or the things Julius Randle is better at, offensive initiation, he's taking away from somebody else, Jalen Brunson, who's better. So this is where the impact trade-off gets a little bit muddled and it's not as clean. The reason OG Anunoby is such a high lube player is there's none of that. There's nothing he's taking away from anybody else when he's his best player. He's out there and he's impacting every play on both sides of the court, and it has nothing to do with anybody else. Jalen Brunson can be his best. Dante DiVincenzo can be his best. Anybody who shares the court with OG Anunoby and OG Anunoby is his best self is not impacted whatsoever. If anything, as we saw with Josh Hart last night, they're elevated because of OG Anunoby's presence. And that is why he's so important to this team.
Yeah, that was so well explained. I love that. And I love that you kind of took it in the opposite direction of like the way you talked about when Randle comes back. So imagine if the Knicks went on a rampage right now, OG's back, they win like 10 of 13 games or something like that. And then Randle is coming back. We would think, of course, we'd be like, Julius is coming back. We're already so good. We're getting this guy who's an all NBA level power forward, multi-time all NBA, multi-time all-star, still in his prime. Oh my God, how are we not going to win the championship? But you would not, you would expect that, right? If it was just as simple as like this guy in NBA 2K is a 90. And so I insert my 90 into the lineup and now I'm even better. But just like you explained, Geoff, there are certain things that he's going to take away in order to be his 90, right? He's going to take some of that away from other players, and he's going to not add it back in some other area. So on the net, it's probably still going to be positive, right? Because the guy is so good, but not as big a positive as you would think just looking at his raw ability. And to me, the biggest thing about, the biggest contributor to lube, or the biggest contributors really are defense. All of defense is lube traits to me, in my opinion. Like when you're talking about off-ball defense, I mean, like you can't take away from anybody else by being a great off-ball defender. Like that is always plus value. And that's something that OG does extremely well, and on-ball defense as well. So like defensively, maybe, if you're a rim protector and that's your skill set, you can't have multiple. You wouldn't have guys that are both good at two guys that are good at rim protecting and then they're not good at other things defensively. So rim protection is kind of like a unique trait that you add, but every other defensive trait I think are lube traits. On offense, something I talk about a lot is passive spacing. So I still believe, and every time I say this, every time I say how spacing is still underappreciated and undervalued in the modern NBA, people are always like, what are you talking about? Everybody loves spacing. Like, this is not something new. And I'm just like, we literally have Precious Achiuwa and Evan Mobley starting games at the 4, like in 2024. The vast majority of people would take Bam Adebayo at the 5 over Kristaps Porzingis. There is clearly a gap between where I am and where the broader NBA community is. And it doesn't mean that the broader NBA community is wrong necessarily. My point is that how important I think that passive spacing is. And, so when I say passive spacing, what I mean is that the threat of the shot creates space, and that is more valuable as opposed to other things that create space, like the threat of you getting the ball with a head of steam and potentially your ability to finish or passing, or the gravity that's created through like off-ball actions. I don't think all spacing is created equally. I think passive spacing is more valuable because it's not contingent. Like it always exists and influences every play. I mean, you mentioned the passive spacing king, Steph Curry. You don't have to be doing something specific. It's not like, well, now you can create your gravity. Your gravity exists. Your gravity comes with you. When you stand in the corner, it's there. When you walk to the other side, baseline to the other corner, it comes with you. It's not that you don't have to like do something. You don't have to have the ball. You don't have to be like, setting screens. It just is there at all times. And I think that when you have that kind of ability to influence a play every moment of every single game just by existing, to me that has like on the net in the long run, on average, is going to have more of an impact than when you have to do something to create it. So to me, passive spacing is the biggest lube trait on the offensive end, and on ball and off ball defense, which is all of defense, are the biggest lube traits on the defensive end. So I think that OG Anunoby literally has both of those things like in surplus, like potentially on the defensive end, the most lube player in the league. And on the offensive end, through his passive spacing, his ability to hit open shots at an insane clip, he has that as well. So it really just changes everything, and would be amazing on literally any team with any players.
It's a really interesting rabbit hole to go down, because I think many fans' aversion to these types of players is, well, what would OG Anunoby do if he was actually the best player on a team? And I don't mean the best player from an impact standpoint. I mean like the best player. Like they were like, OG, you have to run the offense, Like I think, and I don't think that that's something that should just be fully ignored. But at the same time, let's talk about two just totally random players. You have prime Danny Green and prime DeMar DeRozan. DeMar DeRozan was a multi-time All-Star and, elite scorer with the ball in his hands, despite the fact that he didn't shoot many threes. How many elite teams can you go over the last 15 years and say that team would rather have prime DeMar DeRozan than prime Danny Green? How many really bad teams or really mediocre teams can you find that would rather have DeMar DeRozan than Danny Green? It's how do you weigh these things? Like how when you're deciding what is the line where your initiation is so important that the lube factor isn't as important. I'm genuinely asking. I don't know how we're supposed to figure this out.
It's a crazy question. Yeah.
It's so interesting to me because I actually think like there are people who would laugh at the comparison of Danny Green to DeMar DeRozan, but I don't think it's that crazy because I don't know. Danny Green was awesome on both sides of the ball and took nothing away from anyone. And like that, what he did, maybe there wasn't as much skill to it. He obviously doesn't have near the skill of a DeMar DeRozan, but go through the list of champions and try to instill DeMar DeRozan into any of those teams. He doesn't work. He wouldn't work on any of the champions because he would be almost entirely diminishing. Nothing he brought you would have done anything but take away from really, really good players that were already helping you to win a championship. Whereas Danny Green's mere presence on the court, that's why, he literally was on a championship team 3 straight years and an integral, or 2 straight years and then 2014, but he was an integral part of all 3 because just his presence on the court on both sides of the ball helped you. I'm not saying that Danny Green's better than DeMar DeRozan at basketball. I'm not saying that I'm sure of that or that's even a truth. What I'm saying is when you go down this rabbit hole, these are the types of conversations you have to be willing to have because it's really, really interesting and nuanced, and there's a dynamic to it that just isn't solved yet. This isn't baseball. This isn't remotely solved, and I'm actually curious in figuring out where the line is between, like, how high can who is the worst player that is a quote unquote better basketball player than OG Anunoby, where you're like, yeah, we're willing to trade off poor fit because he's just so good. Who would is it Damian Lillard? How high do you go? How high do you go where OG Anunoby is so good and so high lube that you would rather just start with him and figure out the initiating later?
It's an amazing question and definitely a rabbit hole, I think. And to add to the complexity of the rabbit hole, spacing makes creators better. So by that, I mean spacing makes a creator's job easier, right? Like if I am Jalen Brunson and I am a creator, a primary offensive initiator, let's say, and I have 4 elite spacers on the court, that means I have so much space to work with. It's going to make my job so much easier. As Brunson, I can get to the rim. Brunson rarely gets all the way to the rim. I could get all the way to the rim. I could get kind of whatever I want. Now, if I don't have spacers around me and there's a lot of help coming at me, now my job is harder. Now, in order to get to those same level of efficient shots, I have to be that much better. Like I have to be better as an initiator to deal with the worst spacing environment. And so that makes the conversation even more complicated because none of this happens in a vacuum. Like you take a player out of a situation, you put him in another situation. It's completely different. It's a completely different dynamic, and that player could have completely different results.
We literally just saw it across 2 games, like Jalen Brunson against Philly twice. One time when he had really bad spacing, and then it got better. And by the way, we haven't even really said his name. Brunson was awful in the first game against Philly. I absolutely loved what Brunson did in the second game against Philly because it wasn't the shot making we know he can be. it was a humility and an understanding that the best way I can impact this game is by taking what the defense gives me and trusting my teammates. And he had so many Steph Curry hockey assists dealing with those blitzes. It was some of the best navigation of an aggressive defense I've ever seen from Jalen Brunson. The widest variety of slip passes, the most foresight and advanced passing I've ever seen from him. It was super encouraging from the standpoint of, when we get to the playoffs, teams are not going to let Jalen Brunson beat them. They're going to say, like, yeah, we're just not like, we're not going to just sit there and let him put up 40. Some nights he might put up 40 anyway. Some nights he might put up 40 anyway because he's that skilled. But I do think you want to see this level of unselfishness and humility and basketball IQ of just getting his teammates going. And he did that last night. But to bring it back to the overall point you were making about the discussion we were having, I do think it works both ways, and I think it's important to point that out. Yes, spacers help initiators, but initiators elevate shooters too. Like that's the problem. That's what, like, the whole issue and why this conversation is so complex is OG Anunoby can't create threes for himself. I don't want to put the ball in OG Anunoby's. I don't want to put the ball in OG Anunoby's hands and have him shoot 10 threes. Right. You need that person to create the threes for him. You need, like, yeah. So yes, Jalen Brunson's life is easier because OG Anunoby exists, just like your life would be easier if that door behind you didn't exist. But
would it?
I don't know. Your dog's trying to get free.
This guy's gonna give me trouble whether there's a door or not. Trust me. If this door didn't exist, my life would be a lot harder if he had no boundaries. So.
But see, I'm not as smooth as transitions as you. I gotta get more professional with this stuff. But I do think it works both ways, and I think that's a reasonable thing to point out. And I think that's why, me and you, I think the conversation has come a long way, because 8 months ago, you and I were on an island. We got laughed at for saying the Knicks should trade RJ Barrett for OG Anunoby. That was the conversation then. And RJ Barrett has been tremendous in Toronto. He's been so good. And we're seeing how a guy like RJ Barrett can be helped by space. But we're also seeing the inverse of it in New York, how spacers can have an inherent impact or an intangible impact without the ball in their hands. So it's just, we could talk about this for hours, and not land on a conclusion, because I don't know how we get an answer. That's the beauty of this game. This isn't baseball.
Yeah. And to your point about it not being solved, I think it's totally right. I do want to say, I think it comes down to, at least to me, it does come down to, in a lot of ways, replaceability. And you kind of alluded to that as well. The concept of how replaceable is this player, what they are providing. And to me, creators are more replaceable in a lot of ways than these high loop players, which is absolutely against traditional wisdom of the sport. And
you would definitely, I'm not saying I disagree with you, but you would definitely be standing alone in that, in the minority in that opinion.
Yeah, no, I'm well aware, and
we've had this conversation. We've had a conversation like this before about, if a deity exists, and if a deity came down and just told you the answer. Like, we often joke that the world has become so closed-minded that literally, if that happened, there would be people who would look the deity in the face and be like, "No, you're wrong." Like, yeah, I'm still right.
Yeah.
How surprised on a scale of 1 to 10 would you be if a deity emerged from the sky and said, "Actually, OG Anunoby is the most impactful player on the Knicks. He's the most important player on the Knicks"? Would that surprise you?
Oh, how surprised would I be?
Yeah.
2.
So you wouldn't be surprised at all. You think there's a reasonable chance that he's just the most important Knick?
Yeah. I mean, when you say how surprised would I be, basically to me that means, I don't think he is, but how surprised would I mean? How surprised would I be means to me, how much of a chance do I think that that's possible? And I think there's a decent chance that that's possible. Yeah. Yeah, that would.
I mean, Jalen Brunson and OG Anunoby, in their profile, their subset of players who profile like they do, are in a similar range. So it kind of does come down to, who do you think you can replace easier?
Right. And I just think the creation is more replaceable. And the reason I say that again is one thing here that's imbalanced, I'll say, is that shooting is something that's more easy to extrapolate like into a vacuum, because we can know how well a guy shoots when he's open. We can just say this guy has taken 1,000 wide open threes in the NBA and he shoots 45% on them. Like, we know that that's what that guy is. You can't really do that with like creation. Like, you can't go to ISOs and be like, well, this guy scores 1.1 points per possession in ISOs. It's so like, because once you're talking about that, you're adding all the other factors in, right? There's no vacuum there. You're just saying there are all these things that happen and that results in this outcome, right? Like, but shooting is just shooting, right? So to me, it's easier to think about, I guess.
It also is like kind of interesting to think about, like, just how many guys could you replace OG Anunoby with? Not even who profile like him. Like, just how many guys can you replace OG with at that position? And you're like, yeah, the Knicks are still in the threshold of title contenders. And then flip it and say, how many players could you replace Jalen Brunson with at point guard? And the Knicks remain. Like,
yeah.
Is it far-fetched to say that, like, you could go as low as, like, Emmanuel Quickly, like, we love talking about him. If Quickly was the Knicks starting point guard right now, but they still had DiVincenzo, OG Anunoby, and Randall, and Hartenstein, and Josh Hart, and Deuce McBride, and Mitchell Robinson coming back from injury, is this still a title contender? It could be. I'm not saying that's definitely not true. I'm just saying that, like, it does feel like there are more players you could replace Brunson with and feel like, man, there's just so many things this team does well. Whereas, like, the second they lose OG Anunoby, even if Randall came back, even if this was Brunson, DiVincenzo, Hart, Randall, Hartenstein with the bench, it would feel like, oh man, they're pretty light on shooting and defense, like, so it does feel like OG Anunoby is kind of the core that brings this all together.
I think the thing about OG is that there aren't guys who, and this was the argument I made before the Knicks traded for him. There's so few guys that play defense at his level who also can shoot the way that he does. And in fact, he may just be unique in that way. I mean, a guy who is like that is Alex Caruso, but in a different category of, wing type defenders. Like, Caruso can absolutely guard up. I hate when people are like, well, he's 6'5", or whatever. Like, no, Caruso can guard wings extremely effectively.
We've watched him guard Julius Randle.
Yeah, all the time.
They use him on Jokic. Like,
they use him on KD. It's come on.
Caruso's amazing.
Yeah.
And OG Anunoby is like, if you took Caruso and made him a better shooter and made him taller.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think that, like, there's no one really in that archetype who shoots the way that he does. And that's the thing. And that's why I've said you can give a guy like that $40 million a year, whether he is able to create or not. And I have had back and forth with people who are like, nah, you can't pay him that much if he has no creation juice or whatever. It's like, he doesn't need to. Like, what he adds defensively with the shooting is sufficient. Like, that is sufficient because there's nobody else that's doing that. And I'm trying to even think, like, who would I say I could replace OG with?
There's one player.
Is it Herb Jones?
It is.
Yeah, that's the only one I could think. I mean,
and I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming something about you. You can tell me I'm wrong. I would assume you still don't fully buy the shooting.
No, I don't buy the Herb Jones shooting. No, it's super low volume, isn't it? I don't know what I gotta look. I haven't looked recently.
He is shooting, I believe, 44% from three. That was it the last time I looked. He's shooting.
How many attempts per 75? Because that, I'm not in on that.
He is shooting. God damn it. He's shooting 43.5% from three on 4.4 threes per 75, 38th percentile.
Okay, well, yeah. I mean, OG doesn't shoot a ton more volume right now. I think he's at like a little over 6 per 75, but I haven't seen enough from Herb. I mean, OG Anunoby,
hasn't OG done it for like 5 years?
That's what I was gonna say. OG's been shooting like 39% plus for the last 5 years, so it's a different level of sample size. Yeah, if Herb Jones shoots like this, then yeah, he's the guy. He's the next guy. Then yeah, I mean,
I would argue he actually has a higher defensive ceiling than OG. His
Really?
length is outrageous. Like he's just to me, it offers a level of rim protection, but also a level of peskiness in passing lanes that we're
I
speaking
think
relatively. OG is a good rim protector, and he's an absolute pest in passing lanes. I'm not saying he can't do those things. I'm just saying on the relative basis of two super elite wing defenders,
yeah.
I think that Herb has a higher ceiling. I'm not saying he's going to reach that ceiling. I think
Yeah,
OG is
sure.
better right now. I'm just saying I think Herb Jones.
I think in terms of the traits, you're probably right, but where I don't know about Herb Jones because I haven't watched enough of him are the kind of intangible things that I was talking about earlier, where like OG is like always does the right thing. Like again, what I said about, funneling the offensive player into the right place, anticipation, kind of just like his awareness on the court. I don't know. I feel like his instincts.
This is like a Schrodinger's cat thing, though. Like just because we don't know it exists doesn't mean it's not.
No. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying like I would need to watch a lot more Pelicans and for the Pelicans fan. I don't watch Pelicans basketball enough. All right, I don't watch Pelicans basketball enough to break down the intricacies of Herb Jones off-ball defense. So, but that's what I would need to know to be able to like have a strong feeling about whether Herb Jones' ceiling is higher or not. But it's definitely viable.
Yeah, and like who cares? Like no, I don't mean that dismissively to Herb Jones. What I'm saying is like if Herb Jones is good enough that he has a higher ceiling than OG, that doesn't take away from how awesome OG is. So he's the second best of his ilk. Like that's still an amazing basketball player.
Let me ask you this. I mean, and this is like, I know I'm probably on an island here too. I would take, this is going to be funny. You're going to laugh at me. I welcome, put your LOLs in the comments. I would take Dean Wade over Evan Mobley for this exact reason.
Why did you bring this up? What does this have to do with anything?
Because I'm trying to think of guys who are really good defensive players who can also shoot threes and that are good Dean on Wade, and off the ball.
Am I racist? There's no way Dean Wade's a really good defensive player.
What? Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding you.
Let me see. Dean Wade is...
Oh God, I can't wait until the impact metrics just hate what I just said.
Dean Wade defensively plus 2.4 this year, 95th percentile, plus 2.0 last year, 97th percentile, plus 1.7 the year before, 90th percentile. The EPM says he's one of the best defensive wings in the entire game of basketball. So I don't know.
That's wild. I guess I am just racist. I don't know. But he's also, does it not bother? So first of all, wait a second. Mobley has a higher defensive EPM and a better offensive EPM.
No, I know. That's why it's a hot take. I'm not saying that impact metrics support this, like my belief. I'm saying I would take Dean Wade over Evan Mobley. And the reason being because I think he's a higher lube player. I don't think he's a better player in a vacuum. That'd be crazy. That'd be like saying Jordan's a better player than LeBron James, just straight up. That'd be as insane as something like that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying
yeah, you have to like. I feel like our part 2 should just literally be our Jordan LeBron conversation. That should just be it.
We're gonna do that at some point.
We should call it the deleted files or the hidden files or something.
The hidden files. But yeah,
that was like a legit half-hour conversation where we were just like, it was very cathartic for me to just like get all that out, like to hear how surprised you were that people actually believe that. That was very cathartic for me.
We can't be that dismissive on camera. That's the issue, right? Like we can't have those conversations where I'm just like, nobody's crazy enough to think that's ridiculous. Like I don't believe you, Geoff. Nobody's that ridiculously but nobody's brain works that way.
Were that dismissive on camera? So
about like with what? with what?
You're like that would be as crazy as thinking.
Oh yeah. It's like it's couched in a joke though. Whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
I think that I'm just gonna bring it back to Dean Wade and Evan Mobley, and we'll try.
That's what I was gonna do.
I think for the Cavs, it is interesting. And like you could make an argument that like Dean Wade should start, and he should play he should like they should treat Allen and Mobley like clones almost, but instead of having a perfect balance, like Mobley should just play like 18 to 22 minutes a game at center.
Obi topping that boy.
Right, exactly. Give him the Obi Julius Randle treatment. And Dean Wade should just be starting power forward. I think you could argue that the Cavs would just be better. But there are factors that don't involve the 2023, 2024 Cavs in play here.
Yeah, of course.
That you have to consider.
Yeah, of course. We're just speaking like theoretically here, and I'm not saying this is not with regard to what the Cavs should be doing or anything like that. My point is just we were talking about guys who are really good wing defenders who can shoot really well, and they're just not that many of them. Whereas if we look at the Brunson situation, there's a ton of guys who can do some approximation of what Brunson does, which is obviously not to undermine how good Brunson is. Brunson's amazing. Brunson's one of the best offensive guards in the game of basketball, and one of the best players, is an all NBA level player, probably should make the all NBA team this year. I almost can't imagine him not making it. I'm not like a guy who doesn't think Brunson is amazing. My point here is just when we're talking about replaceability, I think we have to look at it on those terms, not just like how high can you get, but also how difficult would it be to replace you when talking about like team building, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about scarcity, and we're talking about how can I get somebody to do the thing that you do, and if you can't, then that player's very valuable.
Yeah, it's a super interesting discussion to have, to say the least. And again, we could just talk about it for hours, because I don't even know how you figure it out. How you to bring it back to the Danny Green, DeMar DeRozan thing. To me, that's just like, I don't know how you'd ever figure out who is truly more valuable or more important if one is clearly a quote unquote better basketball player by traditional terms, and that same player is one who would be better across a bigger role, but then all the teams who have the most success would rather have the other player. It's like, it's weird to me. I don't know how you bridge that divide.
Well, it's kind of like, I don't know. The interesting thing is like, teams would rather have Brunson, right? I think that's true, but like, which teams would rather have Brunson, right? Like,
right.
that's
actually which teams? Like, I agree that over 50% of NBA teams would rather have Brunson, but like the Celtics wouldn't, the Nuggets wouldn't, the Thunder wouldn't. But
the
Bucks, the Bucks wouldn't.
You're saying over 50%. I don't think that's true.
Okay. I shouldn't have said that so confidently.
Look, Dallas, Cleveland, Indiana, Phoenix, Golden State, Milwaukee, Sacramento, Philadelphia.
I think it's possible Philadelphia would rather have Brunson, maybe.
Would rather have Brunson than OG? If they said, hey, you can just take anyone off the Knicks that you want, they would take Brunson?
Maybe. Yeah, Maxi's really good.
Really good, man.
Yeah, and I guess
why would you want to diminish or dilute Maxey?
Yeah. You're right. Yeah, Philadelphia.
They just got rid of Harden because of that reason. So, not because of that reason, but we see what that did for them. Atlanta, and again, just for people, I'm saying this to like, we're not saying that these teams would rather have their point guard or whatever than Brunson. I'm saying if they could take one of the players, the Knicks players, would they take Brunson or would they take OG?
Right. Of course, like the Hawks. Well, maybe not. Of course, the Hawks, but
maybe the Hawks would want to trade Trey for Brunson.
I assume if you put a gun to Jesus, that's dark. If you put if you put a water gun to Landry Fields' head, he would be like, "Nah, Trey's my guy."
Yeah, probably.
But yeah, I agree. What about the Bulls? That's an interesting one.
Would they? The Bulls want as many mid-range shooters as they can get. I think.
Yeah, they love the mid-range. But they have
the Bulls might be one.
They have Kobe White. Kobe White's been sweet lately.
Kobe White is so quick. Like until you watch, he can just get by anybody. It's kind of crazy. Like I didn't know he was so shifty on the ball. What?
I think his hair lulls people to sleep. Like
Seriously,
both defenders and viewers.
It's like you don't realize how I don't know if he developed this burst, but he can like get by anybody off the dribble. It's just like he'll just go, and he's sick. But
I actually think just thinking about it more, I don't think a single playoff team would rather have Brunson than OG Anunoby.
No, because that's because you want additive. If you're at the level where you're a playoff team, you just want additive value. You don't want. You're not starting from scratch. You're not starting from a foundation of nothing, and we need like the first creator through the door. You're already there. You just want additive value. You just want to build, and the only way you're going to build is by adding a guy like OG.
And what this is highlighting is how prevalent initiation is. Like
exactly.
Because all these players already have the initiator. They might not have one as good as Brunson, but they have a facsimile of Brunson. Whereas none of these teams have a facsimile of OG Anunoby.
Which was my point about replaceability. That's why I said I think that the OG prototype is way harder to replace than the Brunson. But that was my point. Yeah.
So I think we landed on it. I think OG Anunoby is just the most important Knick.
Well, and I don't want to backtrack for it. I don't think it like means that though, because like. That's why this is such a complicated conversation. I don't think it like means that he's the most important Knick. Because if
2024 XJ, dig in, make your stance and dig in and never waver from it.
Because if we were to lose one player, the Knicks would be worse off if they lost OG than if they lost Brunson than if they lost OG. So it's such an interesting dynamic.
With quickly gone.
With quickly gone, exactly. When you don't have a clone, you're fucked.
Isn't that weird though? That just changes the conversation entirely. Something that has nothing to do with them as players.
That's a great point too. Yeah, that's a great point too.
Like whether Quickly is on the Knicks has nothing to do with Brunson's output ceiling or impact ceiling and OG Anunoby's output/impact ceiling. But
totally right.
It completely defines how replaceable Brunson is or isn't.
Yeah, and if the Knicks had Dean Wade,
yes. Quickly the Brunson facsimile and Dean Wade the OG Anunoby facsimile. That's what a great show. We're doing great here, XJ. Once again, nobody else has ever had this conversation. So that's what
we're here for.
That's what we're here for.
The number of unique conversations we've had on this podcast already in only 18 episodes.
It is. I will say it is funny that I guarantee you 99% of other Knicks or any podcast discussing the Knicks just break it down as oh, the Knicks are really good. Brunson must be an MVP candidate, and we're finding ways to make it seem like he's less important. Are we sure? Are we sure he's not just completely replaceable?
Yeah, I didn't mean to push it in that direction, but I think anyone who's listening understands we're really, really diving into the nuance of the game as much as we possibly can, we may come up with weird, wonky conclusions, but we're trying to get towards the real nitty gritty of what's actually happening on the court.
I was thinking about that with our Paolo discussion recently. And how it's actually kind of a bummer. If you were a smart Magic fan, I would kind of be bummed that all the pundits, all the casual fans want to just reduce their success to Paolo. One, because I would, of course I would, but I'd imagine that smart Magic fans deep down know it's not true. But two, it just shows how light the coverage actually is. They're not paying attention at all, and they're just, oh yeah, the Magic are exceeding expectations. Let's just give all the credit to their supposed best player rather than care enough to dive in and be holy shit, Jalen Suggs is awesome. Franz Wagner has been really good. Their defense is top 5 in the league. They're winning because of defense. And the defense is 10 points worse per 100 possessions when Paolo Banchero plays. Let's try to figure out who actually is responsible for what's happening in Orlando. That if I was the head of a Magic podcast, that's what I would be doing. And maybe people aren't.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, it would suck if we did a Magic podcast. We would do terribly. We would just come on and talk about how great Franz and Suggs are and how Paolo's overrated. And we would get completely panned by our fan base.
Yeah. All the fans would be like, no, Paolo's an all NBA player. And it's like, man. But like, I guess what I'm kind of arriving at here is like, it still saddens, could be the wrong word, but it's the only one I can think of right now. It saddens me that there's such a market for that type of just lazy analysis. Just, oh, the Knicks could be the 3 seed. Let's talk about why Brunson is in the MVP conversation. Like, I hope we drive the narrative so that one day more people are interested in the ins and outs of not just basketball, just everything. Because I do think that like a lot of this stuff correlates to real world discussions, and it's the reason why more important, content covering more important issues is so lazy and not nuanced at all, because the mass majority of people don't want nuance. They just want to turn on and they want to be reinforced what they already know to be true. They don't want their preconceived notions to be challenged. And what we're trying to do here is challenge preconceived notions and use data and use film to challenge those notions. And I hope there are people that appreciate that.
I have nothing to add. I think that's tremendously well said and well heard by me. And I totally agree. And I hope, that's why people tune in to listen to us, because we're just going to kind of go where the data and where what we see on the court, kind of where it takes us, and just our analysis, thinking about things from a theoretical standpoint, tying it all together. I mean, we're just going to be true to what we think and what we see. And I do want to say, like, I don't think either of us is saying that Brunson is not extremely valuable. I think that we both recognize that Brunson is extremely valuable and actually one of the elite players in the league, and in a lot of ways like underrated in terms of the value that he brings. At this point, I think people don't realize that he's probably a shoe-in for all NBA and should be so. Obviously huge Brunson fans as well. But I think that'll do it for this edition of the pod. Really good conversation. I hope that everybody who's listening subscribes, leaves a like, leaves a comment. We respond to every single comment, on every single video that we have. So if you want to leave a comment, we will definitely get back to you and engage, whether you agree or disagree. It's always really good to have the conversation. So thanks so much for listening. And this has been Hot Hand Theory.